One thing in that I want to say is very important about concessions again, because it's important that these concessions. As I said earlier, the Japanese dollar, the dollar was very strong in relationship to the amount of yen that the Japanese were getting for the purchase of cars in this country. However, that reversed some 5 or 8 years, 10 years later. Over a period of time, the yen became very strong. And with the result is that the Japanese were forced to raise their prices. Now this was done after General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler were given concessions. In a conference up in Traverse City, the head of General Motors, was talking, and General Motors raised their prices. My question of him was, UAW made concessions to General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, because of the inequity between the Japanese yen. However, the yen's become very stronger now, and the result is that Japanese have had to raise their prices. You had concessions. Why are you raising your prices? And he said, we will charge what the traffic will bear. Right. So it didn't matter about our concessions we give them. Which would put them into a much more competitive position than the Japanese, who were forced to raise their prices because of the strengthening of the yen.
Right. Back to, I may be, besides the two of you, the only one in the room that had the pleasure of meeting Art Fox. Am I right about that? Did you meet Art Fox?
Well,
and
not much.
And Edie Fox,
Edie.
his wife, who was a real inspiration for me because she was a militant woman committee person in Dodge, Maine. And so people understand what Pete was saying here about the Ruthers. In the 50s, you see, there was a big, or it was probably the 40s, a struggle within the UAW for control that Walter Reuther won.
In the 40s.
But in the process of winning that, he went out there against his opposition and he used the McCarthyism, actually. Everybody who was his opponent, he called a communist. And I'm talking about Walter Reuther did that, who previously had been a socialist, okay? And through this whole process, he created this enormous caucus that wiped out all opposition, and we know this caucus today. Don't wait. So what Pete is saying is, and I agree with him, is that what in fact happened is a lot of water over the dam. Victor Reuther, I agree with you, realized that what was created by himself and his brother was creating the death of this previously democratic union. That's what's happened here. And then when they changed their policies, since there's no democracy, since it's just run one by one person, and since it's adopted the policy of concessions, that has been what's led to where we are today. And the key element still is to break the lack of democracy within the union, break that horrible caucus. But what Pete was also saying is the way you do that is you always, always, always stick with the issues. If they're right, fine. If they're wrong, you challenge them and nothing backs you down from challenging them. And that's why joining staff is so devastating, because you lose your voice if you join staff. And unless we have those voices out there, we have a problem. What happened to Pete? Doesn't that sound familiar to what happened to Shotwell, Greg Shotwell? It'll happen to anybody who's up there as a leader. They try to isolate you, try to get it so nobody will talk to you, try to make you be just one person, you don't have any. But, as Pete was saying, 3 people, and we have this debate now over the internet a lot, Pete. We can't do anything because we're not enough people. Remember what he said about 3 people. You've got to take action It's got to be based on how many do you think you can get there, but don't ever decide that you don't have enough people, so therefore you're going to do nothing.
We can
Don't
use it in there,
decide
because we
that.
know how many hits we're getting on the American Axle site, SOS, you know, the Google Group stuff. You're getting a lot of people. You know, you're getting hundreds of thousands of people. If you can use that tie into YouTube, people can watching this stuff, that might be a way that where we can use modern technology against them.
Aha, and here's the big debate, Pete. Pete's going to get his promise me he's going to get on the internet. You see, here's the problem. Oh, you're all out there in your study, on your computer. What are you doing? You have a meeting in Flint and Pete Kelly is speaking. Are you there? You see, there's a problem.
I got here because I actually thought there was going to be some college students. You know, and I thought, hell, I don't care if
There's a
there's...
college employee to call
Okay,
you.
now, I didn't care if there was 3 or 4 students, but I figured that's what got my butt up here. You know, I wanted, you got to talk to the young people. You know, they are the future, you know, or you are. You know,
Most
people, you're going to be the future leadership. And, you know, if you're wondering where we're going to wind up, you know, you're going to have to ask the kids. You know, and I'm a little worried about our youngsters today. You know, I was, like Frank, you know, they were so desperate for UAW leadership against the Vietnam War, you know, that I became one of the 5 co-chair people to end the war in Vietnam. Pete and I picked up our red files before they were destroyed, you know, but back then you had the campuses really, you know, moving, and it makes me a little concerned about seeing what's going on, you know, with our foreign policy now, and seeing relatively little action on the campuses. I was hoping, and that's why I got my ass up here, was I thought we were going to run into a few
What
kids.
this guy forgot to tell you was, in that little, is that I led a march from Macomb County College up 12 mile to the Armory, the Chrysler tank plant,
Yeah.
in which Donald Lovesinger, whoever remembers him, was there to greet me with his group, okay? Well, I mean, we have a very hard
You should tell
contingent.
him. You should tell him who Lovesinger was.
Yeah, well, what this fella forgot to tell me was that somebody left his plant to go home to get a rifle to take me out.
Wow.
He didn't tell me that until after the march.
Yeah.
But anyhow, Lovesinger was a real right-wing nut who perpetrated some atrocities, especially on the altar of some church.
Kind of like a duke of the
Yeah, kind of like a absolute right-winger.
You know, we got in a lot of trouble in Warren. Some of our issues was open housing.
That's right.
You know, back when I was president in 1970, just before the strike, you know, we didn't have 50 members, minority members out of almost 5,000. And we thought that was terrible. Well, the city of Warren had rejected federal monies from HUD and decided to tax themselves by an extra $30 million, refusing the HUD money. So we got our local to try to back the lawsuit suing the city. It's one of the few times George Morelli and I were on the same side on an issue. You know, he was the regional director, and our region now is on George Morelli Drive. You know, but anyway, you know, him and I spoke before. We had such a large meeting. We had speakers in the parking lot in the local. It's probably one of the few issues you and I ever lost in the membership. We actually had a minority on our executive board, Pete and I. You know, he was my vice president, I was president. So we got our ass kicked every board meeting, but every membership meeting we could win, you know, our issues. Came out against the war and won it, but we couldn't win the HUD issue.